G'day, May 40 here, looking at the Atlantic magazine, the far right's new badge of honor. My God, the scary far right. Extremist influencers no longer need to preserve their anonymity at all costs. So what exactly constitutes extremist, right? Extremist is someone far away from me and what I consider decent. But the notion that there's some objective meaning to this term is silly when you see who they're giving it out to, all right? Far-right publisher known as Lomez kept his identity private, and for good reason. His company, Passage Publishing, has printed books from a German nationalist. So, from the Atlantic's perspective, from Ali Breland's perspective, simply nationalist. So, simply publishing a book by a German nationalist counts as extremist, right? So simply being a nationalist counts as extremist. So simply putting your own country first, putting your people first, that counts as extremist. My God. Right? He's published books by an anti-democracy monarchist. So that's Curtis Yarvin, who I don't get any benefit from reading. So I'm no fan of Curtis Yarvin. But, okay, anti-democracy monarchist. Why isn't Anthony Fauci an anti-democracy monarchist? Right, he's not a monarchist, but he certainly wants king-like powers during the time of the pandemic. And I don't have any objection to 95% of what Anthony Fauci said. I think he was completely in line with the scientific consensus when he said it. And in times of emergency, all democracies remove rights, whether it's a real emergency or simply a putative emergency. So tarring the publisher of Passage Publishing, Lomez, right, as some extremist for publishing someone with anti-democracy monarchy views, it seems completely removed from reality when all democracies function by their ability to react to emergencies by taking away rights. So why is it the public health establishment? Why are not public health officers? Every single county in California, 58 counties, has a public health officer who has almost unlimited power to take on a health emergency. She can shut down businesses, gatherings. She has almost unlimited power. And I suspect that he would support this power. So even democracy has plenty of anti-democratic elements. But he thinks this guy's an extremist, Lomez.
And
all right,
contracts.
this is Mark
so
Lilla.
There's a priority of the individual to society.
Right, he's talking about the left-wing liberal perspective and how it differs from the right-wing perspective.
The conservative classically presumes the opposite, that we come into a world that's already formed, and in coming into that world, we have...
Right, so if you're on the right and you're authentically on the right, you shouldn't be doing a lot of complaining about the loss of your rights, okay, unless you're just doing that tactically. But if you're doing that from the core of your being, you simply don't understand about what it means to be right-wing.
Of obligations, and those obligations extend not only to others in the present.
Right, if you're on the right, you think more about your obligations than about your rights. You think about what you owe to something greater than yourself, a concrete community, a religious community, a kinship community, a geographic community, the community of your nation, your people. All right, you live in service of something higher than yourself. All right, the left-wing motto is follow your bliss. The right-wing motto is do your duty.
But to those who will come in the future. And that whatever rights we are endowed with emerge out of an understanding and traditional basis of a society and mores and all the rest. So that's a quarrel over what kind of creatures we are. Revolutionaries and reactionaries, their quarrel is about history and not about human nature. Both revolutionaries and reactionaries believe that history, that you can have a radical break in history. The revolutionary believes that that break is going to come, and after it, some radically improved or utopian future is before us, the reactionary assumes that that break has already happened, and it's been a catastrophe. And all of his thinking derives from this assumption about history. So conservative reaction isn't an extreme form of conservatism at all. They're simply about different things. They bring a different different psychology to politics. The older I get, the less interested I am in political philosophy and theory, the more interested I've become in political psychology. And the
So Mark Lilla is a professor of political science. He's on the left. Josh Randall says, "I love you, but I hate your takes these days." Thanks, bro. All right, Lomez. All right, and apparently he's published "White Supremacists Promoting Human Biodiversity." All right, there he means Steve Saylor, and to call Steve Saylor a white supremacist, right? This is obviously Ali Breland, not someone who's interested in truth. Right, he's a left-wing, essentially an Antifa activist, and that's who he really is. And the methods that he pursues in service to his left-wing ideals may take on a journalistic pose. So on X, where he has more than 70,000 followers, Lomas has suggested that journalists be killed. Well, I don't know anything about that. I suspect that's a vast exaggeration. Praise Kyle Rittenhouse. Yeah, I think Kyle Rittenhouse did the right thing, killing very bad people who were trying to kill him, and tweeted a homophobic slur on at least one occasion. Well, the author of this piece, Ali Breland, is happy to hand out slurs that are far more damaging than homophobic slurs. Right, calling someone a white supremacist, right, has far more damaging effect, and it's a slur. It's nowhere close to what Steve Saylor stands for. So last month, The Guardian revealed his true identity, Jonathan Keeperman, a former lecturer at UC Irvine. This made Keeperman upset. On X, he wrote that The Guardian story was obsessive and delusional. They want to harass me. They want to discredit our ideas. Yeah, The Guardian's on the left. Why is this guy surprised? In a war, the other side has a voice too, right? The other side gets to fight back, right? In a culture war, in a real war, the other side gets a vote. And The Guardian's a newspaper of the left, and so, of course, they're going to try to discredit right-wing ideas. Lomez's fans and followers joined him in the outrage. Well, there's no reason to be outraged. Why would you think that you could be the publisher of new right-wing books and not have your identity revealed? That's not doxing, all right? Someone revealing your real name is not doxing you, all right? Giving out someone's address, giving out the address where someone works, all right, that's doxing. All right, Christopher Rufo wrote that the Guardian author was a human worm. Even the mafia has a greater sense of decency. All right, this kind of crybaby complaining from the right is ill-befitting someone on the right. I would think that you'd have a more stoical and more manly approach, right? To be on the right wing means that you're primarily concerned with your obligations, not your own rights. Conservative Substack author wrote that Lomez's identity reveal would bring the threat of violence from Antifa goons. It might. And if you're not willing to stand up to threats, then you should remove yourself from the public square. Right? People want to change the world. People want to do heroic things. People want to stand up and fight for what's right, but they don't want to pay any price. They don't want to be held accountable to have their real name revealed. Right? They want to be free from any kind of blowback. They are outraged when the opposition tries to discredit their ideas, right? That's just childish, right? So we all want all the good things that we can get, and we want to minimize the bad things that tend to come when we get good things, all right? Everything we do usually comes with a blessing and a curse. But this article is onto something profound. So there's a subtle shift that's been playing out among anonymous far-right influencers and their followers. Right? It used to be preserve your anonymity at all costs, but now far-right posters simultaneously want two incompatible things to be anonymous and not. Well, everyone wants incompatible things. Right? American Jews want to be distinctive and yet not pay any price for that distinctiveness. right? Most people want to be distinctive. Most American non-Jews want to be distinctive and not pay any price for that distinctiveness. If you place a great value on being distinctive, that will come at a great cost to your ability to form bonds with other people. You will be lonely and you will be kept out of the loop in your community if you put more emphasis on being distinctive rather than being connected. So many people who aren't possessing normal bonds to other people want to fill up their soul with a feeling of distinctiveness. I mean, I read so many books and I do so many live streams because I'm not rich, I'm not powerful, I'm not married, and I don't have kids, and I get a large part of my meaning in life from doing these live streams and preparing for them and reading books and writing essays and living the life of the mind, right? And for many people who live the life of the mind, it's a solace for losing at the game of life. Right? It's a solace for losing at the game of becoming wealthy, becoming successful, becoming powerful, becoming influential, developing a family, having children, and being influential in the real world. And when you lose at those games, all right, and you're intellectually inclined, you can take solace in books. The far right's fear of getting doxxed emerged for a reason. Yes, it doesn't have to be on the far right or the far left. If you're saying anything or doing anything that's going to be unpopular with the people who are important to you, you're going to pay an enormous price. All right, we all want to be connected to the people that we want to connect with, and we also want to be true to ourselves. We want to express what we think and what we feel and what we see, and we want to stand up for what we believe in, but we don't want to pay any price. Well, if you stand up for unpopular things publicly, you're going to pay a price. If you have some edgy online persona that is anonymous, all right, you're very likely going to face a day where your real name will be revealed, and you'll have to pay the social costs of pushing out ideas that are unpopular. Right? To be known as a racist makes your life harder. And why people so fear being known as a racist is that the term racist just has infinite flexible meaning. Right? It can be extended to virtually anyone and anything. And so conservatives in particular tend to fear speaking out because they don't like being tarred as racist because they know there's no effective response. And so conservatives are far more loath to speak out at work and in public square because they know that the left has a very effective label. That's to call you racist. Now, the best rejoinder in my perspective is that there's no such thing as racism, right? It has absolutely no objective meaning. It's a moral category that was invented in the past century, in particular in the last 60 years. Prior to the 1960s, hardly anyone ever talked about racism. Right? None of the great moral thinkers in history had a moral category of racist and non-racist. Right? It's entirely developed by moderns like same-sex marriage. Right? Prior to the last few years, there's absolutely no notion or practice or reverence for or celebration of same-sex marriage throughout history in any culture. Right? In South America, North America, Europe, Africa, Southeast Asia, North Asia, right? Nobody was celebrating, observing, practicing, giving recognition to same-sex marriage, right? It's entirely an invention of the last few decades. It has absolutely no resonance in history, no precedent in history. And as someone who's on the right, I think the time-tested ways of doing things are superior to newfangled ways of creating families, such as same-sex marriage. Okay, getting doxxed is very likely to make you anxious and depressed, right? And the ideal, right? And I understand there are going to be exceptions to this ideal, and I don't live up fully to this ideal, but it's something that I hold as a goal for myself, is to live as though everybody knows everything. So most of my life, I tried to live by trying to get away with as much as I could get away with. At home, I was a preacher's kid. I learned to code switch. I'd speak at home the way that my parents expected me to speak at home. But then as soon as I got away from home, then I talked the way that I wanted to, all right? And then I would get turned in, right? Students would turn me into the teacher for saying the swear word bloody. I don't believe I've ever turned in anyone in my life. I've never reported anyone to a teacher. I've never made a complaint to HR. I've just never played this game, right? I don't like the doxing game. It just seems incredibly underhanded. I'm thinking of someone close to me now, and he told a joke to a group of his female classmates, and they laughed uproariously, and they wanted more of these risque jokes. So he told them more risque jokes, and they laughed and laughed. They wanted more and more. Eventually gave them, all that he had, and they laughed. They loved it, and then they turned him into the teacher. So I don't like this kind of catty, nasty operation of personal destruction. I'm not a fan of doxing, not a fan of trying to destroy people, right? But to be on the right, I would expect means that you accept reality, right? And so if you say unpopular things, you might lose contact with friends and family, right? You open yourself up to unknown repercussions, and occupying the high ground of virtually every major institution gives the left and the center left tremendous power to hurt you. So you want to be courageous, you want to fight for the right things. Well, there's a price to be paid, right? Courage and changing the world and standing up for what you believe in, even though it's unpopular, it comes with a price. Now, visibility also has upsides. Right? Visibility has downsides, visibility has upsides. Everything we do comes with a blessing and a price. So for many anonymous accounts that are being doxed, right, they now become better known. They get more followers. And with more followers, they get more influence, more social connections, more professional opportunities, right? And so often revealing your real name comes with more benefits than curses, right? After you stand behind your words publicly with your real identity, you can sell subscriptions to a newsletter or to a podcast. You might land a book deal. You might get a job in the right-wing media ecosystem. And this happens again and again and again. But there's no clear trajectory, all right? Life gets a say, reality gets a say, and your opposition gets a say. And so there are very good reasons why people are concerned about being revealed for their anonymous, edgy account that's saying right-wing things online. All right, so citing far-right influencer Bronze A pervert sounds absurd, but citing and praising the real man behind it, Kosten Alamariu, right, that's something different. And so the costs of getting doxxed have lessened. Do you remember 2020 when we were incredibly concerned that free speech on live streams was just getting shut down? Well, now we have the development of Odyssey and BitChute and Rumble and locals.com, and we've got Substack, and there are all sorts of other ways to monetize the things that you're saying and doing. And getting doxxed is not as scary as it was. Also, woke is not as strong as it was in 2020, right? Woke usually carries with it a negative connotation. Most people are not thrilled by the woke revolution. So the guy named as Based Beth Jesus, he was identified. Then the AI startup he founded published a press release announcing it had closed a $14 million seed funding round featuring prominent investors. So the internet has changed in a way that insulates the far right from the severity of the repercussions that were hitting it in 2018, 2019, 2020. We've got Discord chat servers, we've got Patreon groups, Telegram channels, Substack newsletters, right? There are all sorts of ways to dodge moderation by the major platforms. And influencers can insulate themselves from the consequences of being canceled in the mainstream, right? Bronze Age Pervert publishes his podcast on Gumroad. It's a subscription site similar to Patreon. Libs of TikTok have amassed more than 127,000 Substack followers. And Christopher Rufo notices that outing an anonymous right-wing account seems not to have the same devastating effect that it used to. Right? There's a much stronger ecosystem out there, right? And there's more support, and you have more resources and more people that will help you deal with this kind of thing. All right, so Lomez, in 3 days after the Guardian story was published, he got 20,000 new followers on X. So it's not surprising that people on the right will hyperventilate like people on the left, right? We all want as much as we can get, but we don't like the consequences of what we can get. I worked as a reporter for many years, and I noticed people love nothing more than talking about themselves, and they hate nothing more than seeing their words end up in print. Right, due to popular demand, I come back here with a quick excerpt from the latest edition of Decoding the Gurus, released June 7.
Mentions last night, asking whether I'd read his book, and I was like, no, of course I haven't read your book. I mean, I know what's in it because we listened to you speak to Sam Harris. We dealt with all those things with actual experts, like you said. But why would anyone read a book by someone who is a banker/journalist? That's his background. Has weird libertarian.
All right, this is talking about Matt Ridley, who wrote the book promoting the lab leak hypothesis with Alina Chan.
Has written other books saying that all the climate scientists are making stuff up. And as you reminded me, Chris, has famously quite strongly implied that AIDS, I think.
He just considered the possibility that AIDS, HIV, there was another origin possible. Just asking questions. That is the modus operandi.
So yeah, in this alternative universe, all of the climatologists, there's a shady conspiracy afoot. They can't see what's obvious to Matt Ridley. All the virologists, there's a shady conspiracy afoot. They can't see what's obvious to Matt Ridley. In this alternative universe, he's the person you should be going to find out the lowdown on these very technical scientific subjects. No, he is not. No, he is not.
Yeah, and I've referred to this habit that people have of surfing the discourse. Essentially, like when you hear anybody talk about the lab leak or really anything with COVID, it is almost all just referencing a handful of headlines and the views of media pundits and presenting that as if it represents science, as if it represents a universal experience that everybody had, that, there was a headline in Slate or whatever liberal outlet, and that headline, not even usually the articles, because when you dig into the articles, they tend to include qualifying information, but the headlines themselves or individual snippets, which are endlessly repeated on right-wing media of a two-line answer from Fauci in some interview where he spent 1 hour, going into detail about trade-offs and whatnot. And then they say, nobody discussed any trade-offs there was never any reference about things like that. So all that kind of thing happens. And an example of this, usually the people that are doing this are people like Nate Silver, Matt Iglesias, kind of people, right? Like there's a whole host of them. They often don't have relevant scientific training. So they treat science as if it's a similar sort of thing as opinion punditry. Like that is the way that they react to it. And an example is Nicholas Kristof, who is a journalist, I think also for the New York Times, a columnist, quite a venerable one. And he wrote, quoting Alina Chan's article, "I don't know what caused COVID-19, but I do think Alina Chan makes a strong case for a lab leak in Wuhan. In retrospect, many of us in the journalistic and public health worlds were too dismissive of that possibility when she and others were making the argument in 2020. Now, Matt, that's so frustrating because maybe Nicholas Kristof.
Okay, I just bought a new water bottle because my old one broke, and I just realized now there was a good reason why it offered a straw, but maybe I'm putting it in wrong. Okay, I'm definitely doing it wrong. Man, only $8. Keep chugging, feeling awesome. Don't give up. Almost finished. You did it.
Was dismissive. But the public health and scientists actually did investigations into the possibility. They actually wrote papers. They actually examined the possibility in quite a lot of depth. They did take it seriously. The WHO.
I admit, I threw the straw out, and then I realized, okay, it worked much better with a straw. So thoroughly cleaned it off. I'll figure out how to use this water jug with a straw yet.
Sent in investigation. There was multiple efforts and ongoing efforts to detect the origin.
And they gradually came to some very definitive conclusions. And so there is a scientific reality there underneath the surface. And on top of it is the discourse, including the mainstream and the alternative media, which is flip-flopping between this shock, revelation, new thing, this new, and then they...
Smoking gun.
Yeah, swing gun. And then they make out that it's all wrong and they backtrack it. And then it all makes for copy, I guess. But they make out that their discourse is the actual reality of the scientific investigations that have been going on. And it just isn't. Very frustrating.
And Alina's key arguments are there was a lab in Wuhan, the Fuse project submission. These are all things, again, that we talked about in depth with the people over a year ago. So why this is being presented as breaking news is just that whole thing because of the way discourse works. It was in the New York Times. It doesn't matter that the arguments have already been addressed. And many scientists, relevant experts, link to threads highlighting that. So there we go. That's it. Another round of lab leak discourse. And some people asked, oh, what do you think about this new thing? And nothing. I already know that Alina Chan thinks the lab leak is the most likely thing. She wrote a book about it. She creates conspiracy tweets constantly on Twitter. There's nothing new for her to say that she thinks the evidence is leaning more towards a lab leak. So nothing changed. Just the New York Times covered it. That's what changed.
Yeah, which isn't information. It isn't evidence. It's just now you can point to a New York Times article. Okay. All right. Okay. That's us being grumpy old science men.
Yes. Well, so in another corner of the internet map, we previously talked about Alex O'Connor's interview with Jordan Peterson. And
okay, let me fast forward here a little bit more as I get back together.
You don't have to, right? Like it's not.
Yeah.
There you go.
What's the sort of moral basis of it? But I don't think he does. But he doesn't want to sort of own that position either, because it's kind of a weak position to not be a proper Christian. Yeah.
Now, almost all the people that I've seen waxing lyric.
Oh yeah, this is Jordan Peterson, right? I mean, it is curious. He does deserve some scrutiny and mocking, because his Christianity is just not recognizable to any Christian denomination.
About the kind of Christian tradition.
Right. So one of the tough things about being part of an organized religion is that your co-religionists can call you out if you're not living up to the ideals, or if you're articulating something that's completely contrary to what your religion stands for. And Jordan Peterson's religion is just simply unrecognizable as Christianity.
And the importance to consider ritual, and people really, they're missing these, fundamental aspects in their life. And all that. Almost all of them haven't grown up religious. Like, if you were raised, like I was raised Catholic and went to mass every week, there's no hidden secret world of, oh, I've never considered. I've met religious people my whole life, people who believe in the Bible, people who don't, they're all going to church, they're all doing different things, and there's people that are into Christian mystics or not, or, they join priesthoods or they become monks or nuns, whatever the case might be. And it isn't this fantastical, mystical realm of psychological interpretations and imagery. It is just, there are people in the world that are religion, there are religious traditions, there's stuff in religious traditions that is boring as hell. And a lot of it rests on supernatural claims. And how do you feel about that? And the theological claims, it isn't such a fantastical mystery that nobody's ever considered if you are somebody that has been raised in a culture where religion exists. So I think that part of it is an epiphenom of the people coming across this stuff later and regarding it as very esoteric and, just like they never were aware of the beauty of the Christian tradition. And they're like, yeah, then all right.
well, that's the funny thing about Russell Brand with his publicizing his newfound appreciation for Christianity and his spiritual journey. And it's this exotic thing that he's embarking on. I don't think he'd ever actually go to church or do any of the boring things that run-of-the-mill Christians do. But the journey he's on is so epic. And I guess it's appealing to people.
I think he is going...
Yeah, so one of the tough things about religion is it holds you accountable. All right, you're expected to step up and to contribute to your community and to abide by a certain code of behavior. And when people seek out spirituality, it's often they're seeking out the benefits of belonging to organized religion without paying the price, which is that you're held accountable for your words and your deeds.
The church, but it's just layered all that. Well, I don't know. At least he's making an initial effort. Let's see in 1 year's time. But the whole point about it is, my lack of faith in Christianity is well documented. But, one of the things I do recall is that you're not really supposed to publicize your great works and your, spiritual achievements and whatnot, because those people have already received their reward on earth. The person who gives and doesn't make a show of it, that's supposed to be the thing. But Russell Brand absolutely has made a show of, his Christian conversion.
He doesn't have the right temperament for Christianity, I feel. It's not really in his nature.
Evangelical Christianity, fine. Like evangelical American-style megachurch Christianity.
Right. Nick Fuentes, I mean, he wraps himself in Jesus Christ, but his religion is completely unrecognizable with any form of Christianity. He doesn't practice Christianity. Right. If you are religious and you're serious about it, then where do you hold yourself back? Like, what do you abstain from doing that you really want to do because of your religion? Like, what exactly does Nick Fuentes hold back on doing because he's such a trad Christian, right? He doesn't go to church. There's nothing recognizably Christian in the way he speaks and operates. It's just a pose, such as it seems to be for Russell Brand and for Jordan Peterson.
But like Church of England style or, Irish Catholicism, no, not interesting enough. So yeah, that's the way it is, Matt. And like, last thing I'll say is I've been to Barcelona, right, and seen the Sagrada Familia. What a beautiful architectural wonder, the mind of Gaudi, who did that. I love shrines and temples all around Japan, and there are beautiful buildings, beautiful elements of culture that come from religious traditions and devotion and all that.
Do you like the sound of church bells, Chris? Do those church bells ring you?
I don't like them that much, to be honest. I'm not a fan. But the thing is, culture, human culture is interesting, and we can make profound and beautiful things, but it also comes through literature. It also comes from science and all these different things. So marking out Christianity or religion as like this fundamentally different thing, that needs to be regarded as this beautiful pearl that nothing else can be compared to. It's exceptionalist and exoticism and all that kind of thing. And it doesn't mean that you have to be this kind of hard-nosed reductionist person saying, "Oh, I hate all church buildings," and
we should build those cathedrals and so on. No, of course not. No.
But you don't have the alternative. Doesn't have to be the indulgent waffles of Peterson and Brand. Like, surely there's another path that we can all take. So yeah,
I think we can all agree with you there. Yeah,
that's it. Well, Matt, another thing that happened. Now, we often...
Okay, so I read a lot of academic essays. I read a lot of academic books One of my favorite websites is Google Scholar. I want to know the latest and greatest academic perspectives on things that are in the news, so I can look for something that's deeper than what's being offered in the news media. So I noticed that a favorite word among academics is problematic. Right? It has to be one of their top 5 words. But I also noticed when I asked them, hey, why don't you describe your hero system that leads you to use the word problematic, right? They feel insulted and they retreat into silence. Right? I've emailed them, I've asked them, hey, why don't you describe your hero system that renders so much of reality problematic? Right, so Merriam-Webster has a definition of problematic. So 1, posing a problem difficult to solve, not definite or settled, so uncertain, open to question or debate. But the way that I notice problematic primarily being used by academics is having or showing attitudes such as racial prejudice or ideas that are offensive, disturbing, or harmful. So what constitutes an offensive idea depends entirely upon your subjective partisan hero system, right? What you find disturbing is largely a result of your subjective partisan hero system. The ideas that you consider harmful depend upon your hero system. And our hero system is something that we tend to inherit from our community, or we adopt it from the community that we join, such as the academic community. So the use of the word problematic goes hand in hand with the word racist. So I looked it up on Google Ngram Viewer, right? So that tells you how often a word is used in published books. And so here, the top Ngram Viewer shows the word problematic. It didn't start getting used until the 1960s. And then similarly, the Google Ngram Viewer shows that books didn't use the word racist much until the 1960s. So racism is this made-up moral category that had no popular currency until the 1960s. Somehow, all the great moral thinkers in history prior to the 20th century had absolutely no concern about this great evil of racism. Don't problematize super predators. Instead, change your standards. So if academics had the strength of their convictions and they weren't afraid of owning up to having a subjective partisan hero system just like everyone else, they'd just say bad. But talking about good and bad must sound Christian to academics, so they pretend to have transcended partisan hero systems, which is impossible. You can't live without a hero system, some sense of what is heroic, what is great, and what is terrible. Now, academics are loath to admit the distress they feel when their subjective hero system has been violated. All right, if you believe in heterosexual marriage, then you're going to feel some distress at the legalization and celebration of same-sex marriage. Right? If you believe the military is a heterosexual institution, you're going to feel distress when gays are admitted and celebrated in the military. So we all have a subjective hero system, and we all feel varying degrees of distress when reality challenges or violates our hero system. And as human beings, we are primed to lash out at the more severe offenses to our hero system. But academics won't fight back in a way that is, say, true and raw and vulnerable, a la how American conservatives lash back when somebody desecrates America's flag. So academics subjugate their impulses to reference good and evil, and instead they employ the careful language of the courtier, cocooned in his buffered identity. So here's an example from one of my favorite academics, Aaron W. Hughes. He published a great book in 2014, Rethinking Jewish Philosophy Beyond Particularism and Universalism. So he wrote that Franz Rosenzweig's goal is extremely problematic because it is based on a series of essentialisms that emerge from a particularist rhetoric. So why are essentialisms a problem? Why are they bad? And why is particularistic rhetoric bad? Aaron W. Hughes writes, the juxtaposition of Judaism and philosophy is highly problematic, used as it is to serve potentially ideological or political ends. So here he is pointing out a problem in logic. Right? This is not so much a moral objection. Franz Rosenzweig's woefully inaccurate understanding and representation of Islam is based on his need to have a foil for his equally problematic and racially charged reading of Judaism. So Here, in part, problematic means that one should not have a racial reading of Judaism. But of course, Judaism is the culture of a very particular people. In other words, there is some currency in describing Jews as a people, a nation, or even a race. Rosenzweig's essentialist characterization of Judaism and the Jewish people inscribes both with a set of highly problematic traits grounded in racial and national politics. So having a racial politics and a nationalist politics is highly problematic, according to academic Aaron W. Hughes. He also writes, Maimonides and Rosenzweig, now seen as symbols for medieval and modern Jewish philosophy, succeed in creating authoritarian Judaisms, right? Authoritarian, problematic, even though there are plenty of circumstances. In fact, much of the world operates on authoritarian hierarchical lines, right? Most businesses run on hierarchy. Most employees are essentially slaves when they go to work, right? But Aaron W. Hughes criticized Maimonides and Rosenzweig's authoritarian Judaism is based on a self-constructed rhetoric of authenticity, what amounts to a rather problematic reification of Jewish peoplehood. So he objects to nationalism, including Jewish nationalism. And he writes, I suggest that such responses are not authentic precisely because authenticity is such a problematic term, one that is always just out of reach and is always constructed. Well, all terms are just out of reach and always constructed, right? All words, all terms are metaphors for reality. Authenticity, no more than 100,000 other terms. Yet problematically, Jewish philosophy has been and continues to be invested in manufacturing such an authentically Jewish response. All right, so you're probably wondering, who is this Aaron W. Hughes? He's got a new book out called, well, came out 2 years ago, 10 Days That Shaped Modern Canada. Woo-hoo.
And I just have always loved Canadian history, and I'm proud of Canadian history. I'm proud to be Canadian. And I really think these are stories that people need to know, not just historically, but also every single date that's in there influences us. So anytime you pick up a paper, you should be able to, based on any headline, should be able to go back to one of these these formative days.
I got to get you to hang on for a second while we take a quick commercial break.
Hey, no.
The school system.
Yeah, no, it's very painful, and I think that.
So he's talking here about the Canadian school system and the allegations of abuse against Native Canadians, the Canadian Indians.
So even of the 10 days, I try to make the argument that not all the 10 days are the same. So we can point to some days like December 6th, 1989, when we had the massacre at the École Polytechnique in Montreal. We know what happened, and then we know what happened because of it, in terms of gun control and those kinds of things. And then there's other dates, like the release of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the executive summary. And I tried to make the point there that we don't know what's going to happen because of that date. I mean, we can either say, we can acknowledge it and say, yeah, this happened, and then we can move on as if just sort of sweep it under the carpet, or I think if we're going to be true to ourselves as Canadians, no matter where, new Canadians, old Canadians, whatever we want to call ourselves, we really have to wrestle with the residential school system and with our I think really poor treatment of our Indigenous populations. I mean, there's another date that I also say could be symbolic, but hopefully it will be more than that. And the final chapter is the date on which the new $10 bill with Viola Desmond was released. And again, that's an attempt to. I love the note, which is just sort of in long, and on the one hand we have her picture on the front, in addition to parts of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We have to decide what are we going to do because of that. I mean, it's not clear. So. These dates, the future of some of these dates still has to be written, and I hope we'll write them positively, and it won't just be symbolic.
Well, going back to the release of the executive summary on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I think that if we take a look at the way that attitudes are changing, since then in conjunction with that, we had the Supreme Court decision known as Silcotin, which established a standard of of ownership for First Nations that didn't exist before. Since then, the federal government and the provincial government in British Columbia have introduced the principles of UNDRIP, something that some people say we don't need because we already had Bill 35. But what I see happening as a result of this is that there's this move to say we're not going to have two separate societies in Canada, and maybe that fits in.
Okay, so it's nice to say we're not going to have two separate societies in Canada, but what happens when you have different people who have different gifts? Right? People primarily want to hang out with people like themselves. And the more diversity you have, the more disruption you're going to have to your society, the more you're going to find that people prefer to hang out with just their group and they will steadily withdraw from the public square. But these guys have the delusion that with all this diversity, that out of the many can come, one strong Canadian identity.
Also, you point out that the introduction of the Multiculturalism Act was fundamentally important to the nature of Canada.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I guess I should almost preface the whole book, or maybe I should have prefaced the whole interview by saying, I love Canada and I believe in Canada. Canada's not perfect, far from it, but I've lived in many countries over the past 50 years, and I damn well can't think of a better experiment than the Canadian experiment with its ability to include people. Does that mean all Canadians are inclusive? No, of course not. We've seen this recently with various protests, but I think that there is an awareness.
It'd be great to have a conversation between Laponius and this man. So Laponius, a regular here, he's not such a fan of Canada. Whoa. So, what the heck? What's going on here in Canada? Oh, it's the evening commute. Right, Canada just has massive amount of immigration. The quality of life has been steadily destroyed, and maybe the new multicultural Canada is
that
problematic.
Before, again, it was always a platitude. It was lip service. There's three founding peoples in Canada: French, English, and Indigenous. Of course, the Indigenous were always left out of those conversations. I think increasingly now they're being brought in, and I think it's so important. I mean, it's, to me, it's so, our treatment of Indigenous populations is very upsetting to me, as I think it should be to most white or non-Indigenous Canadians. So I mean, I don't think that the book isn't certainly going to bring them in the conversation.
Welcome,
but I do
Elliott
think
Blatt
that
back to the show. Elliott, what's going on, bro?
Hail
Canada!
Bro, can you hear me?
Hail Canada, bro! Hail Canada!
Can you hear me, Luke?
Yes, I can hear you, bro.
Right,
and soon the people over in Afghanistan will hear you too.
Yes. What great days those were. Hey, was I watching your stream? I saw where Mearsheimer was saying that realism actually leads to compassion, and where liberalism leads to authoritarianism. This sort of paradigm.
Yeah, in the sense that realists don't feel the need to change other people. They don't feel the need to convert the world to liberalism. And if liberals are going to succeed in making more and more countries liberal, they're going to have to do it with authoritarianism.
Yeah, and then the reverse, that realists, I forgot how he put it, but he says that realists ultimately are the more benign force, of the more compassionate force.
Right, because they accept people as they are, and don't need to transform them ideologically.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting insight, which I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, there's something in liberalism that naturally impels people to these world-transforming projects, and and liberalism has driven the United States and other nations to try to, change the culture of Afghanistan and change the culture of Iraq, and then if they had any success, they're looking to change the culture of Iran and Syria, but it doesn't work. It just turns into a disaster.
Yeah, and like liberalism is always sort of at war with human nature. It just thinks that it can be overcome and transformed, given enough reason, right?
Yes, correct.
And their job, therefore, is to increase the amount of reason.
Yes, get people to repress their instincts and substitute for them the higher, more reasonable liberal left approach.
Yeah, very, very. It was a very concise formulation. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Anyway, so I got a little news to report here.
Yes, sir.
And it brings up a little question. So every year there's a race. There's a foot race. It's actually a triathlon that goes on in the city, and they close both sides of the street, right?
Yes.
So that you can't park for 24 hours on either side of the street.
Yes.
And this takes place on Sunday. So the rules are they close the street at 2 a.m. Sunday evening. So the wee hours of the morning to noon the following day. Right? And so they post it on the street. And this has gone on the entire 15 years that I've lived in this apartment. And it's become a sort of annual ritual, and everybody knows, the rules of the game, and everybody plays accordingly, that you need to move your car on Saturday so that the race can take place on Sunday, right?
Yes.
And so, but this year, there had been a few, they post these signs along both sides of the street every 100 feet or so. But somebody had made a mistake, and some of the signs were printed June 8th at 2 a.m. instead of June 9th at 2 a.m.
Right.
So some of the signs said June 8th, some of them said June 9th. It's hard to understand. But basically what it meant was that at Friday night, meaning 2 a.m. Saturday morning, a full 24 hours before the race began, if your car was on the street, it would be towed.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
According to some of the signs, but not according to other signs. So there was like two regimes in place at the same time. Two parking governments, two sets of rules in place simultaneously. So at any moment, you could be both in compliance and not in compliance of the law. Now, guess who was not in compliance according to the law?
You.
Me, Luke. Me.
Yes.
I woke up Saturday morning, went out to find my car, and I had this whole itinerary planned for the day, and I was, eagerly anticipating my little, series of errands I was going to run. And I go out to where my car is theoretically was going to be, the same place I left it previous nights, and it's gone. There's just empty space as far as the eye can see. My car has been towed.
Oh, that's the worst feeling. It's only happened to me once or twice. I hate it.
Do you know how bad that feels, Luke? Do you know, it's not a pain that you can really describe with poetry. It's so
devastating.
deep.
Yeah.
It goes to the core of your spine. You can't shake it off. You're just sitting there with this thermonuclear explosion just coursing through your body. Right? This intense pain. It's not merely emotional pain. It's literally physical pain that hurts your body. And so I start feeling this intense pain, right? And I'm like, I got to do something. I literally physically cannot withstand this pain. I've been sick for 3 weeks, and now this, it's just one thing after another. I'm just purely, I'm just not prepared for this now. Not now. You can't do this to fucking me now. Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm feeling all this pain. And then I said, wait a second. If you continue to feel this, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to get sick. You're going to damage your body, not merely your soul. You're going to damage, not your emotions. You're going to damage your body if you just keep feeling this.
Yeah.
And so I said, I just threw on this sort of super ego. And I just said, accept this and deal with it. Stop feeling this. You're just retain control. Have you ever done this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't use that direct approach. I would use in a week, you're not going to be thinking about this. In the great scheme of things, this is minor. That's how I would approach.
Well, that's exactly right. That's sort of the approach I said.
Okay.
In the bigger scheme of things, this is nothing. You're not going to remember it.
Yeah.
And you can go to that place now. You can just write this off. You can transcend this utterly painful moment,
Yes.
And so, I don't know. I did that. I did like this sort of Clinton-esque compartmentalization where I decided not to feel what was truly legitimate feelings of rage. And then, so I bring all of this up to say, I feel like that's what everybody's doing now, vis-a-vis sort of immigration type of atrocities.
Yeah, or crime.
They just compartmentalize it. Because the pain is too great
Yes.
to take on directly without feeling a lot of really intense painful feelings, they bottle it up and compartmentalize, and then they sort of slowly vent it out on Twitter, forms of sarcasm.
Yeah, or to friends, and I mean, one could have a not very nice aspect to one's job, right? That's very, very common, and you don't want to be there thinking about that when you're out of your job. Like when you're done with the job for the day, you don't want to be thinking about how some part of your job or overall your job sucks. So yeah, I mean, I prefer to focus on the things that I have some control over, but I don't like to hang out in those feelings of rage or impotence or to spend excessive amounts of time decrying those things over which I have no control.
Yeah. And this is a lesson that's really taken me a long time to learn. I guess this is maturity. This particular attitude, like cultivating this attitude, and just, life sucks and then you die, or, just accept what you have no control over, the Lord's Prayer or whatever it is that gets you through. But it's such a necessary component of life.
Yeah, you don't want to have a whole bunch of things that you have no influence over, and if there are a whole bunch of things that you have no influence over, you don't want to be spending your spare time thinking about them to a great extent.
Yeah. Okay, well, I just want to reflect on that. Item number 2.
Yes.
Narcissism.
Yes.
So, can narcissism be healed?
Yes. For some people.
Now, which of the two is the more effective mode of addressing narcissism? Traditional therapy or 12-step?
Well, the dominant psychological approach is that nothing will cure narcissism. So So the normal therapeutic psychological approach is that therapy is not going to cure narcissism. So therapy says that therapy is not going to cure narcissism.
Okay, so there is no sort of programmed course.
Right, there's no cure for narcissism is kind of the dominant mainstream approach in the world of psychology.
So it's a spiritual condition and not a psychological condition?
No. It's a psychological condition, but there's certainly a large strand of the psychological world that says that there's no cure for it.
Okay. Now, do you believe that there's a cure for it?
I think there is for some people. I think that they can be moved, say, from a 7 to a 5 and even to a 4 or even possibly to a 3. Yeah.
Okay.
And I believe that I've moved. I believe that I've moved. I believe that I'm less narcissistic than 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Now, do you believe that you need to be capable of A, recognizing narcissism, and then B, recognizing narcissism as being undesirable and wanting to change, right? Wanting to... Where do you think the ability comes from? Is it from a religious tradition, or is it just so much pain has been inflicted upon you because of your narcissism that you introspect?
I think that it doesn't primarily come from a direct approach. So it doesn't primarily come from lining up how much narcissism is hurting you and then striving to do better. It comes from some kind of inner change. And that inner change may be because you develop some closer friendships or a relationship, or you see a model of how to conduct yourself. So, for example, if you're under stress, like you're under stress when your car was towed, right? You're going to be much more predisposed to narcissism as a form of solace if you have directions in that way. But if you can create a life that is less strain, less tense, less vulnerable, then you'll have less of a need to reach for the reflex of the comfort of narcissism. So I think as you develop connection to other people, then the narcissism starts to drop away because you don't need that adaptation. You don't need to reach for that tool if you're not in distress. Like, narcissism comes out when you're in distress and you need to hide it and squelch it. But if you can develop a way of living that's effective, you're going to feel less distress and therefore feel less inclined to reach for the maladaptive tool of narcissism.
So is narcissism sort of a reaction to feeling that your survival is threatened?
It's almost always a state rather than a condition. And so that there are meaning it is situational. Overwhelmingly for people, narcissism is situational. And so you may have someone who is particularly narcissistic at work, but when he comes home around his wife and kids, that it considerably diminishes. So when people are in a situation that does not conduce to narcissistic display, they are going to be less narcissistic. So if people are able to shift their situations or shift their predispositions so that they're less needy for that narcissistic comfort, then they're going to reach for it less. I forgot your question or your challenge.
Well, I was asking if it were tied to one's sense of survival being threatened. Like, the sort of, I had this insight, and it's very hard to articulate, but people develop survival skills or survival modes.
Yes.
Right? And it's sort of like a real sort of primary drive.
Yes.
And the behaviors that you did when you were young or an infant that you did, which you felt preserved your survival, is what everybody sort of regresses true
Yeah.
when they're under stress or they feel that their survival is threatened.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not a psychologist, but it was sort of a connecting piece that I landed upon. And I did so after having dealt with a very, very peculiar narcissistic episode by a mutual acquaintance of ours. And I just, it's just very
it's a learned response.
Mm.
And if the rewards of it diminish and the price of it gets higher, you're going to turn to it less. Like it gets stronger or weaker depending on circumstances. So it's a way to bury emotions like fear, sadness, loneliness, and shame, because you don't like those emotions. And so the more intense those emotions, the more you found it useful to shield yourself from them with the belief that you're special.
Yeah. And that's why I'm trying to figure out what to do with this particular relationship, because I feel like I'm sort of indirectly contributing to a pathology that this narcissist is demonstrating. And I was never, it was something that I sort of fell into accidentally. And I'm trying to figure out on how to put distance on this, because it's actually creating annoyance, pain in my life. So anyway.
Right. So a couple of thoughts. When you're in survival mode, that essentially enables you to do anything. And so I live much of my life in survival mode. It makes you incredibly flexible in your ethics because, hey, I'm in survival mode. So from age 22 to about age 42, I was dominantly in survival mode. And, some of that time I was living out of my car. And so people in survival mode are incredibly flexible in their ethics, and they're very dangerous to you. And then as for people who may not be good for you, I'm usually not a fan of just cutting people off completely, but you can turn people down. Like you can reduce the amount of time you interact with them. You can reduce the intensity with which you interact with them. You can change your interactions from real life to something more distant, like a phone call. So proximity, frequency, intensity, duration, right? You can turn people up or down in your life by fiddling with those knobs.
Yeah, it's funny because the closer you let people to you, the more they can hurt you.
Yeah.
Right?
And a lot of people are fine when you keep them at arm's length.
Yeah. And I feel this person is trying to get closer than I feel is safe and appropriate, Right.
So you have to put some distance because you've got a history of trying to help a lot of people who got too close to you and were not good for you.
Yes. And I feel like, and the thing is, it's like, this is where the religion question is. It's like, I feel like I was acting out of pure-ish religious motives. And your egolessness is celebrated in religious traditions, right? You want to be able to sacrifice yourself to a degree for the benefit of the group. This is the type of thing that I would wrestle with. And I think you would come back to me and say that, well, that may be true, but there's sort of a psychological drive in me that's actually.
Yeah, it's a learned response. You're demonstrating a learned response of getting into this predator-prey game where you're the prey, and you get high from rescuing people. And the high that you get from rescuing people is just as pathological as the high that people get from manipulating others into rescuing them. And it's not good for you.
No, it isn't. Okay, so new topic. It seems like the tribe of Abraham is having a lot of PR problems.
Yes.
Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
I've never seen things quite this bad. I don't know. it's causing me a little bit of stress, I guess. And particularly Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro seems to be a PR disaster right now. You been following any of this?
No,
Candace
I haven't
Owens?
followed Ben Shapiro, so I have no idea what's going on with Ben Shapiro.
Well, he fired Candace Owens recently,
Yeah, I remember that.
and she's kind of spilling the beans in different ways.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
juicy.
But she's doing it in a way she's also under a legal agreement, so she
Right.
has to walk a tightrope. And this itself has become sort of a lot of, a source of a lot of ridicule on Twitter. And it's an amusing internet subplot that I've been sort of clued into. And I don't know if you've been picking up on some of this.
No, I haven't followed it at all. But just to set the stage for people who don't know who these two people are, Ben Shapiro is a frequently nasty person who has a very duplicitous message, which is that, he just loves to debate anyone, but he won't debate any serious thinker on the left or even the center left. So he puts out a duplicitous message, and he tends to be a pretty nasty guy. And Candace Owens is completely, bat crazy at times and incredibly brave at times. She's just all over the place, while Ben is as predictable as Big Ben. Is that fair?
That's very fair. And it's now, I don't know, it's creating this thicket of confusion. And it's getting a lot of anti-Semites, a lot of fodder. And I don't know, do you think Ben will ever be shown the door? Is Ben Shapiro good for the Jews, Luke? That's what I want to know.
Well, he's not complicated. He just speaks very rapidly with the most conservative talking points possible, even if he doesn't know anything. And he's not complicated. He's just pumping out conservative perspectives in accordance with Orthodox Judaism in a way that is shallow and duplicitous. And but I don't see why he's any worse than anyone else in his genre. He's not likable, right? If you don't share his views, he's not likable. So there are a lot of people, for example, who don't agree with anything I'm saying, but they find me likable. And
Right.
there are a lot of other commentators who you don't necessarily agree with much that they say, but you find them likable. Ben Shapiro is not likable.
No. And so that flows into the last point of this call. You have advanced the notion, you are probably among a minority of Jews who believe that it would be best for Jews in Israel if the U.S. were to cut ties. And it seems like a really minority position and if a non-Jew would articulate this, they're going to be called anti-Semitic. And how many people do you think believe as you do? What percentage of Jews do you think believe as you do?
Maybe 5%. And it's not so much I want the U.S. to cut ties. I think the U.S. should stop subsidizing Israel. The
That's
U.S.
right.
should have a normal, self-interested relationship with Israel as it does with New Zealand. Right? I'd like the United States to have the same relationship with Israel that it does with New Zealand, unless there are circumstances or particular situations that would merit something differently. But I just fail to see why it's in America's best interest to be so deeply entangled. I don't see why Israel deserves to be subsidized. Israel is perfectly capable of paying its own way. And so I'd say 5% of American Jews, meaning of those who care deeply about Israel. So I care deeply about Israel. So probably only a third of American Jews care deeply about Israel. A third care mildly, and a third don't care at all. So among those who care deeply about Israel, I'd say probably 5%, maybe 10% would support the cessation of American subsidies to Israel.
Okay. That's interesting. So I didn't know it was quite so low. But I just would like to be able to have a thoughtful conversation about this. And it seems like it's impossible because accusations are ready to be hurled at any, as soon as you start deviating from the Ben Shapiro line, you get treated to a lot of, a barrage of, I forget what's the best word.
Yeah. There's
of antipathy, a barrage of a program. And it just, so anyway, I just trying to navigate all this, Luke.
Well, it's tough because if you want to fit in with people who care passionately about Israel, then taking this stand will remove that entire community. That entire community will be against you. And on the other hand, you're not going to feel at home with the people who loathe Israel either. So
no, I mean, I have absolute loathing for the sort of Palestinian protesters in San Francisco, and I don't want to be grouped with them in any sense of the word. But, I do have sympathy for people who are frustrated by the extent to which the fates of Israel and the United States have been intertwined. So anyway, just
Israel lobby definitely has a profound effect on our system of governance, not in a completely unprecedented way, because all sorts of special interests have huge influence over our political process. It's how our political process is designed and is operated and has always operated. It's just that the Israel lobby is very effective at what they do. So I think there are things that can be learned from it, but I don't see it as being in America's best interest.
But it's this effectiveness that has become sort of a double-edged sword, because it's also been the source of a lot of antipathy.
Yeah. Yeah, there's going to be a price to pay.
Yeah.
There's going to be a whirlwind.
Yes. And it's like, when it all nets out, does AIPAC really help or hurt?
It's a big question. It's not an easy question, because you can make a fairly strong case that there would not be in Israel without America's subsidies and disproportionate relationship with Israel.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I got it off my chest.
Okay, how you feeling, bro?
I sound worse than I am, but it's like there's this last bit that won't heal. It's really annoying.
We're going to pray for you, bro. We're going to pray for you.
But my voice, it's the laryngitis. It really got deep, and it's creating this speaking problem, and it's well over. It's worn out its welcome, Luke, and I think tomorrow's the day.
Okay, thoughts and prayers. Take care, bro.
All right, peace.
Okay.
All right, bye.
I want to play a bit more from Aaron Hughes, who is Laponius's favorite academic.
Can't tell the story of modern Canada without including those whom have traditionally been excluded, i.e. the Indigenous. Just like we can't tell it without taking into consideration voices of alienation in Quebec, which are very, very valid voices of alienation. We can't tell the story of modern Canada without talking about the voices of alienation in the West, which are also very valid voices. So how does one create this sort of inclusive Canada? And I think we can do it, but I think we have to have people that believe in the Canadian experiment. And
so remember, creating an inclusive Canada or an inclusive Orthodox Judaism means watering down and retracting many traditional practices and beliefs and forms of identity. So it's not like you just create an inclusive Canada or an inclusive Orthodox Judaism. An inclusive Orthodox Judaism is no longer Orthodox Judaism. An inclusive Orthodox Judaism is no longer Orthodox Judaism. It is something else completely. An inclusive Canada is no longer Canada as it was up until the 1970s. It's no longer Canada. It's a completely different beast. And so people on the left, like Aaron Hughes, they talk as though extending rights and creating more inclusivity comes without paying a price. But what you're doing is destroying people's social cohesion, social trust, people's sense of ease and feeling as though they're at home. And so it's a lot easier for highly intelligent, like this guy is brilliant. We're talking like 160 IQ. It's much easier for the brilliant to navigate a highly diverse Canada compared to the vast majority of people who have IQs around 100.
I think if anything, the chapter on multiculturalism, the chapter on the charter.
So multiculturalism means you've destroyed the distinctive identity of Canada. You have destroyed social cohesion and social trust. Right? You have destroyed the historic Canada. You have destroyed the traditional inhabitants of Canada and removed their sense of safety in the world. You are destroying their hero system, right? You are destroying what they regard as heroic and good and true and beautiful, and replacing it with something that is horrific for them.
The chapter on Viola Desmond, all of these try to show what a great and inclusive country we can become if we.
So why do Orthodox Jews, enjoy each other's company and feel at ease with each other? Because you're with people who subscribe to a highly restrictionist, unique, highly demanding way of life. And if you start becoming more inclusive, right, you destroy the safety and trust and cohesion and the whole beauty of the system.
Continue on this path and not enter down the paths of identity politics and
identity politics. You can't live without a hero system, and a hero system can also be called identity politics. All right, it's absolutely essential to the way a normal human being operates is to have an identity, and tarnishing his identity, destroying his identity in the name of inclusivity, you're doing great harm to people with one type of identity. All right, people who believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, right? Their sense of themselves is harmed when you legislate and praise same-sex marriage, right? That is a horror for people who believe that marriage is as it's always been, just between a man and a woman.
And exclusionary, being exclusive of others.
You cannot have any type of civilization without exclusion, right? Do you love your spouse? Right? If you have a satisfying relationship with your spouse, it's because you've agreed on a contract where you exclude other people from having sex with you and your spouse, right? You've established a particular home that excludes other people, except for those times when you selectively invite some people, right? Without exclusivity, right, your marriage and your family home will be destroyed.
Pension benefits under the Old Age Security Act. Even though that they lost, it did pave the way.
Talking about here the battle for same-sex access.
The battle for same-sex access to spousal pension benefits under the Old Age Security Act. Even though that they lost, it did pave the way to same-sex marriages. And what does that say about how these days that you have pointed out influence change that may take time to unfold?
And so this change, right, it comes with benefits to some people and harm to others, right? Those who hold to a traditional understanding of community and marriage and family are harmed by these changes, right? When you have a hero system, you feel harm when your hero system is desecrated. Okay, hey, we got Curious Gazelle. Long time no speak. Curious, how are you? Okay, Curious, what's going on?
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
I sure can. Good to hear from you.
Do you know what? I've just downloaded StreamYard as an app, so I'm going to log on to that and then I'll rejoin.
Okay, great. So, but you do sound loud and clear.
I'm accessing it via my browser right now. Yeah, no,
okay,
but I'll come back in a minute.
Come back in. Sounds good.
But it ignites the process.
Exactly. And I think even Egan v. Canada on May 25th, 1995 only makes sense in light of the patriation of the Constitution and the enactment of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms as a constitutional Bill of Rights as opposed to a non.
And when you add rights, right, the left talks about as though you're just creating and adding, but you're also subtracting, right? When you pass civil rights laws, you are diminishing original understandings of private property and freedom of association. Right, you are reducing social trust and social cohesion when you force people to employ people that they don't want to employ, to rent to people that they don't want to rent to, when you remove the safety that comes with having a homogeneous, cohesive neighborhood, right? You're wreaking great harm on some people and creating benefits to others, right? It's somewhat zero sum.
Constitutional Bill of Rights, which we had before that, and. I mean, given the Charter and its protection of human freedoms, when the Egan v. Canada came before the Supreme Court, even though the court ruled against them, every single one of the 9 judges agreed that sexual orientation had to be a protected ground. And because of that, I mean, within 2 years or within 3 years, we have same-sex marriage. The same thing you can talk about. I'm not going to talk about abortion and Henry Moore.
Okay, so when you make abortion legal, right, you are adding rights to those who want to be able to abort. You are taking away rights from everybody else, right? Taking away rights from those who believe that the unborn have some rights, right? You're taking away rights from the unborn. You're taking away rights from those who believe that the unborn have rights, and you're taking away rights from the father of the unborn baby. So if you say that abortion is a woman's decision alone, right, you are increasing her rights at the price of the rights of the unborn, the rights of the father, and the rights of society or anyone who cares about the sanctity of the unborn. So it's not like you just add rights to an abortion and that there's no price paid.
Morgenthaler, but again, prior to the enactment of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, he could be hauled before the courts. Afterwards, no, because a woman's right to the protections are a protected ground in the Constitution.
Curious.
So again, all
How's
these
it going?
dates, then they're not.
Hi, nothing much. It's quite late over here. It's nearly 3 a.m., but I couldn't sleep. I was wondering, have you completed Decoding Destiny? Because I think you did your 6th part or something like that recently.
Yeah, I believe I have. I mean, I did 4 parts, and then I listened to a live stream of his simultaneously as it being live for the first time, and I thought I might spend more time on Destiny, but then just the little bit extra of his content I consumed, it was so much about his feuds with Hassan Piker, this person and that person, and I just lost interest. But he may spark my interest in the future, but for now I've lost interest.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when you lose interest in people? Do you not wish to continue streaming about them?
Right, I just move on to other topics. So, I mean, I've got like 20 topics, notes on about 20 different topics that I want to get into. So, for example, I wanted to do today's stream primarily about the academic use of the word problematic and how academics love saying that this and that is problematic, and what does that mean, and why do academics love that word. But then just before I started the show, I saw this article on how the right wing is reacting to doxing and how it's a little different than how people on the right reacted to doxing a few years ago. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll start with that. And then I will go to the use of the term problematic. So there are so many things to talk about. And Destiny's feud, people's feuds in general, I'm not invested in Ben Shapiro's feud with Candace Owens. I'm not really interested, but I mean, if Destiny says something interesting, then and it comes to my attention, I might talk about it.
So how many parts have you done then? Because I think I
did
probably
4.
read the Roman numerals wrong there. That's probably where it was rather than.
There were some problems, and some of the Roman numerals on some shows weren't exactly accurate, but I did do 4, and the fourth one should have the links to the previous three. So do you have thoughts on Destiny, the streamer?
No, because I didn't really consume any of his content. Like, he doesn't inspire me to go and listen to him. I mean, I'm just thinking about it. Like, in terms of the decision I make in my head, it's like if I'm listening to a sort of atheistic YouTuber or content creator, I might as well just listen to Sam Harris, who's much clearer and has such a sort of wide, expansive range of topics.
Yeah, I guess another thing happened as I started decoding Destiny. I realized that his popularity was largely based on this hyperbolic, flamboyant language, like Zizek, that I just tire of fairly quickly. So I take my yarmulke off to Destiny for being very smart and probably the best at the activity of live streaming. He creates a compelling show. He's a pro at it. But this
I did
hyperbolic
watch his
stuff just turns me off, gets me bored.
So, like, is he hyperbolic during streams or more?
Yeah, I mean, he's always using this dramatic overstatement that it turns me off. I understand it's attention grabbing, and you know, I understand that it's very effective, right? But it just kills my enthusiasm. So here's an analogy. When I cut a short and it's about how Donald Trump's going to win or how Donald Trump is doing well, there's an enormous audience for that, right? I can get 10,000 views for a short where I talk about something positive about Donald Trump. And so you see people like Tim Pool or whatever, they go where the audience wants them to go. And Destiny, in large part, goes where the audience wants him to go in the sense of making these, you know, really colorful, hyperbolic, exaggerated, you know, feuding attitudes towards the news of the day. And it just strikes me as tiresome and juvenile.
I mean, did you watch his debate with Milo Yiannopoulos on God and Christianity? And Christian nationalism?
No, I didn't. Was it good?
So I haven't watched the entire thing, but Milo's appearance was interesting to me because he sort of appeared out of nowhere after a long time. And he seems to have sort of changed a lot. He's taking Christianity quite seriously. He's undergoing sort of gay conversion therapy and staying away from sodomy. So yeah, I mean, I can't remember now because I didn't really watch it that consciously. But I think you would probably find it very interesting because in that setting, Destiny will tone down his sort of rhetoric and play the role of the more rational person, and Milo will be the entertainer.
Yeah, Milo is another one given to very flamboyant stands, and I'm quite skeptical of people's claims of being saved if it doesn't lead to concrete actions to try to repair the damage that they've done to all sorts of people. And Milo's just been so horrible to so many people that until I start hearing or reading about evidence that he's trying to repent and make amends to all the harm that he's done, I don't take his flamboyant gestures seriously.
Sovereign is the sovereign is the one who decides the exception.
I'm sorry. What was?
The sovereign is the one who decides the exception. So could you not apply that to Milo Yiannopoulos if you think about him as a sort of celebrity icon? You know, he does have a lot of power when speaking. I don't know if you agree with me.
Oh yeah, he's very articulate and he's very compelling in a dramatic, flamboyant way. He also causes chaos and disruption and misery everywhere he goes.
I don't think so. I think he's held people like Jordan Peterson to account, which I quite enjoyed. I consider in my own head, in my own way of categorizing information, I categorize Milo Yiannopoulos as a rationalist. I don't actually categorize him as a rabble rouser and a sort of entertainer. When I listen to him, I take away all of that fluff, and I just listen to him for his arguments. Because you know how people can be deceiving, right?
Right.
So Milo Yiannopoulos deceives people in the sense that he almost pretends that he's really larger than life, but he's actually quite rational. And then Destiny, on the other hand, now I've not watched too much content of Destiny, so I can't really make a fair judgment here. But if I were to compare him to Milo, maybe Destiny is the one who's sort of LARPing as the hyper rationalist, but underneath it all, he is, a bit of a weirdo. And actually, there have been some leaks of Destiny's sort of sex life and sort of weird behaviors, going off to Israel, meeting men, and just weird sort of how can I put it, sex pest sort of behaviors. So those, at least with Milo, these things are more overt. So insofar as I appreciate people who are not hypocrites, I think I appreciate Milo in this regard.
There's a word that immediately comes to mind as you started speaking that I think is a favorite word among academics, but it's absolutely apropos of both Milo and Destiny. They're both performative, right? They're always.
I thought you were going to say. Do you know what I thought you were going to say?
What?
That they're both problematic.
Well, they're always. They're very good at creating drama, and they're always performing. And I mean, I find it tiresome, but they are certainly attention getting. But they're always performing. They're always amping up the drama. It's like they're on a stage always. It's just like the most successful yoga teachers tend to come from a background in TV production, and so they become really good at putting on these shows that they then stream online, and it's a dramatic and artistic performance, and that's what Destiny and Milo, in their different ways, are very good at. They have this theatrical temperament. They love to immerse themselves in different characters and play out different characters, and they're very good at it. So it's a marketing. It's a marketing thing. It's an act.
No, I'm not. I said I agree with you, but there's something missing from this analysis. I mean, are you now content with how much you've analyzed Destiny, or do you think there's still something missing? Because the fact that you stopped streaming about him, is that a sort of indication to you that you have kind of understood him now, or what is it?
Yeah, I think I do have a good grasp on it, but what it is that I simply lost interest, right? It's like,
But why did he take so long? Why did he take so long to decode? Because you've done a lot of these decoding episodes, right?
Much less, because there are more levels to Destiny. So he can have a highly rational, verging on academic conversation, or he can take it right into the gutter. So he can go low, he can go high, he can go upper middle brow, he can go lower middle brow. The man contains multitudes. He is highly intelligent, highly skilled. Like, he's very good at live streaming. He's very good at performance. He inhabits these different characters. And yeah, there is a lot that he's done that contains considerable depth.
And he is quite brave. in that
Yes.
he could have gone in the direction of most sort of MAGA types, but he chose not to, and he could have sort of cringified atheism, but he stuck to his principles. You know, if
Yes.
someone's an atheist, let them be an atheist. That's their sort of belief. I mean, a lot of these, I'm noticing that a lot of the atheists online now, some of them are like, I said a lot, but okay, some of them are tilting towards Catholicism and just sort of like fake online
Yeah. Russell
religious
Brand,
stuff.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Andrew
Joe
Huberman.
Rogan was already Joe Rogan was brought up in the Catholic faith, so that's understandable. But Russell Brand said, "Oh, I'm being persecuted," and then all of a sudden he converts to Christianity. He converts to Catholicism. That just seems like escapist behavior to me. Yeah. Nonetheless, okay, I was talking about atheism. Yeah, so a lot of the atheists now, they seem to be sort of cringifying new atheism, so that they look at Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and they just sort of laugh at these people. So I appreciate that Destiny hasn't fallen into that cringification trap, if that's what you can call it.
Yeah, I mean, he is amazing for the degree to which he stands by his principles, even though it causes him a lot of trouble and is, causes him a lot of aggravation. But he sticks to a lot of unpopular principles, such as, like, he doesn't think that the use of the N-word is just some, inherently awful thing. And that's not a popular perspective. He's someone on the left who loves guns. He's open that he's bisexual. I guess not so much a principle, but I think he has tremendous courage, and he does seem to operate within the integrity of his stated principles to an extraordinary degree, considering the genre in which he's works.
Truth to power.
Yeah, he's working in a genre that tends to not attract the best in people. And then those people who are not so great to begin with start usually going steadily downhill. And he does an amazing and commendable job of sticking to some challenging, difficult principles that require genuine sacrifice on his part.
Well, this is why this is why I still appreciate Sam Harris. So even though I personally, if I was American, I would support Donald Trump. However, there was a time when Sam Harris was really sort of anti-Trump, and he still is. And everyone used to say that, oh, he's got Trump derangement syndrome, TDS, and I absolutely hate that term, by the way. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, it's a cheap put down.
Yeah, and it's not even like a sort of nice use of language either. It just grates me, actually. Yeah, so he was on Trigonometry, and the podcast Trigonometry.
I know, Constantine Kissin.
And he said something like, well, it was a sort of like thought experiment to make a decision about Donald Trump, and he's like, well, even if Hunter Biden who killed somebody or something like that, something to that effect, he's like, even if Hunter Biden murdered somebody, I still think he's better. Biden is better than Donald Trump.
Yes. He got a lot of grief for that.
And me personally, I was like, no, actually, he stuck to his principles there.
Yes, absolutely.
And he wasn't, and he didn't mean language in a literal way. It's not like people are like, he's so cold. He's just this cold atheist. No, he doesn't believe that people should go around killing people. In fact, that's one of his sort of criticisms of Islam, is that, there is no value for human life. That is his understanding of the Islamic faith. So he worries about that. So he's not a cold, evil person. He's a good person, Sam Harris is. And so in that moment, I appreciated him.
Yeah,
I appreciated him, yeah.
I think he was being honest and forthright, because a normal person, if you are pro-Biden or pro-Trump, you wouldn't care if they they murdered someone because you believe in something that's greater than some stranger who you don't know. So it would be Sam Harris was articulating the honest perspective.
Yeah, indeed. So what is it that actually makes you respect people who are honest in the moment?
Well, when they're paying a price. So Russell Brand and Nick Fuentes and these people who immerse themselves in Christianity or Milo, I don't see them actually sacrificing anything. It just seems like such a performance. But when people like Destiny or Sam Harris are willing to pay the price for unpopular perspectives, for example, Sam Harris had Charles Murray on his show and he apologized to Charles Murray for slandering him in the past. So when I see that people are willing to walk the walk, not just talk the talk, and are willing to pay the price for what they believe in, that's much more impressive. Like if someone's genuinely a Christian or genuinely a religious Muslim, there are parts of their own predispositions that they are not acting on because of their religious commitment. Or if you just stand for something, forget religion, if you stand for something and you're willing to sacrifice for what you stand for, then that indicates a certain level of integrity.
And for me, it's also, I mean, this is included in what you're saying, but I'll just say it more explicitly, that when people oppose the mob, mob
Yes.
morality,
Yeah.
you should have some beliefs, like you should believe in something and know why you believe in it, right? As opposed to just because people are forcing you.
Yeah. People who have the courage to stand up to the mob, as opposed to, I'm thinking about this.
Because by the way, that mob, sorry, but that mob made Sam Harris leave Twitter. He is off Twitter now. So it's been like 2 years, I think, since he deactivated his account. And it was explicitly because of the mob, because people have not been kind to Sam Harris. They've been really horrible, I think.
Well, Twitter's not for everyone, and so it's good that Sam Harris saw it was not good for him, because Sam Harris has some significant weaknesses. He tends to react to criticism, the mildest criticism, in often incredibly thin-skinned and hyperbolic way. He makes absurd claims.
Do you think so, though? What is the proof of that?
Oh, I'd have to go back to my shows on Sam.
Because again, for me, that is a misinterpretation of Sam Harris. I mean, people don't even question individuals like Douglas Murray. I'll give you an example. Whereas Sam Harris, for some reason, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can just, criticize Sam Harris to his face as well. Like recently, Rory Stewart, who used to be an MP in the UK Parliament. He's a Conservative Party politician, but he's left the Conservative Party now because he doesn't agree with, its new sort of populist application, I guess. That was you can call it, if that's what you can call it. But yeah, Rory Stewart was interviewed by Sam Harris, and Rory Stewart was absolutely fine with Sam Harris in the interview, and they were debating things, including Islam. And then after that, like a week later, Rory Stewart was on another podcast, and he says to the host, well, Sam Harris was asking me about Islam. Oh God, like he's so fixated on this. And it was sort of like, well, why couldn't you have just said it to Sam Harris's face? Like, why do people think that it's, they can just get away with bitching about Sam Harris like that? And sort of he kind of backstabbed Sam Harris, I think, because he presented a sort of friendly face on his Making Sense podcast. That's the name of Sam Harris's podcast. But then as soon as he's on another podcast, he's like, Sam Harris is an Islamophobe. So I didn't appreciate that at all.
Right. Obviously, it's more impressive if he could have done it to his face. Often people don't get clarity until after an event, and not everyone is equally equipped to confront someone else face to face. So not everyone has that strength.
Rory Stewart is the kind of person who would.
You would think
ask
so,
someone
wouldn't you?
To their face, yeah.
Yeah, you would think so.
But I mean, what is it that makes Sam Harris so unlikable? Because to me, he's not really done anything wrong. He's a nice man. He's married. He's got a kid, or I don't know how many children he has, but he's a father. He's respectful. He doesn't even like swear. I feel bad for him. Like, my inner sense of justice comes out.
Well, I don't think about Sam Harris, and I've never thought deeply about him. He's not, someone in my radar, but there's just so much silliness to the way he operates. So he goes on a big pontification about how you wouldn't understand his politics unless you practice the type of meditation that he practices, of which there's absolutely no empirical evidence that you have to practice a certain type of meditation to be able to understand certain politics. I just find him incredibly thin-skinned and dramatic.
By politics there, what does he mean? Maybe
he means that he means that he has transcended the normal partisan tendencies because of his practice of meditation, that he's able to
I agree with him.
Rise above normal human pettiness, and that it just seems like a ludicrous self-assessment.
Do you know who's really done that? I feel like Andrew Tate and Elon Musk have managed to do that. I think you have managed to do that, actually.
Yeah, I can't judge myself. It's certainly something I strive for.
Yeah, but it's quite difficult to transcend the sort of left-right divide. It's almost like an institutionalized debate in Western democracies. And if you don't sort of choose a side, people think you're a bit of a weirdo. But I feel there are some people who have been able to transcend it and get away with it. I'd include you in that group. So you are up there with Andrew Tate and Elon Musk.
Well, I do try to transcend, normal human partisan pettiness. I try to I strive for that. Obviously, I will fail. I've got right-wing tendencies, but I try to be as fair and as disinterested as I can, as opposed to being partisan, and just I strive not to tell my audience what it wants to hear. I try to stand up for what I believe in rather than what my audience wants to hear.
So, okay, we now have some outstanding topics to address. So we still have the analogy thing. What was the second thing that we were going to discuss?
Well, I did delve into analogies because you prompted me, and one of the points that I remember from my research was that it works when you like the person making the analogy. When you're already sympathetic to the person, you like the person, you're already attuned to the person, you basically go along with them, then analogies are very persuasive. But as a normal, formal, logical type of argumentation, it's usually not very strong.
Oh yeah, that's a nice sort of conclusive point about analogy, but we still need to delve deeper. I'm not saying right now, but I'm just wondering, what other topics did we outline? I
will scroll through some of previous conversations and try to come up with a list. What have you primarily been thinking about the last few weeks? It's been, a couple of months since I've spoken to you last?
No, it's not been that long.
Okay, in the last month, what have you been thinking about?
Nothing. I don't know. It's just all up in my head. I can't really. I'm having trouble with language itself. Like, I'm in a very sort of nihilistic state right now. Like when people speak and they say things, I just think like, why? What even is language? It's such a bizarre thing to think in one's head, right? And it can detach you from human action, human behavior, groups, etc., completely. But this is what's on my mind. Like, is language just merely rhetoric?
Yeah.
Is that what humans do? Is language just, are humans just always lying? It's too deep a question, and I don't wish to even address it with anybody, because it's too nihilistic. But that is what's been going on in my head. Like, I'm no longer thinking about analogy, not really thinking about any particular personalities, not really thinking about, you know, Andrew Tate and Tateism and all this stuff that I was previously quite interested in. I mean, I still am interested, but it's not preoccupying my mind.
How long has nihilism played a significant role in your art?
I think for a long time, but it's never been related to communication itself.
Mm.
Like I no longer ask the question, what's the point? Because even that's a pointless question in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more like, one of the questions I had in my head was like, isn't it strange that the sociobiologists and the sort of new atheists, the biological determinists, they use rhetoric so much, and that drives me insane because that is a contradiction within the context of their worldviews. Like, their worldview should actually dictate, like, the logical extreme would be that language itself is so meaningless because it's literally just someone's vocal cords doing the work. It's just noise.
Now, I think obviously I have no training in this, but I think you're going through a period of depression, and what comes along with depression.
It's not even that. It's something really rational.
Okay, let me finish the point.
Okay.
Depression and nihilism have an adaptive purpose because we all tend to expend our emotions and our efforts in many different ways. And then when we go through a depression or an illness or a nihilistic phase, we look at all our striving and we question whether it's worth it. And then we contemplate perhaps, you know, living and operating and caring in a different way. And then we run through our head, you know, new ways of living. We think about all the striving and the caring that we've been doing that seems not really ideally suited to our own best interests. And so then we run various scenarios through our head for a more productive way to go forward. And so I think this whole depression, nihilism, illness phase is really useful and adaptive for many people. You don't want to live there, but going through it for a few days, weeks, or months, I think is a very effective way to reset yourself and enable you to consider if your exertion emotionally, practically, rhetorically is worth it. So just like your computer often works better when you restart it, I think we often work better when we restart ourselves by going through these phases of nihilism. Because I go through them. I go through them frequently, and I stop streaming, and I think, you know, is this worth it? Or are these particular streams worth it? Or are my efforts worth it? Or my emotional expenditure, intellect, is this worth it? And I go through hours and days of nihilism, and then I start thinking of a more productive way to go forward, and then I run through those scenarios in my mind, and then after a time I seize on what I think is a more productive way to go forward, and I let go of many of the things that I was doing or was caring about.
Okay, well, I've sort of run out of steam now.
Okay.
So,
Thanks for stopping by.
yeah, the main thing was that I wanted to ask you about your stuff to do with Destiny because I was genuinely intrigued as to how many hours you'd spent on this, on decoding him, relative to your decoding of other people.
Yeah, I probably spent 10 hours on Destiny while like Ben Shapiro would take me about 40 minutes.
Do you feel satisfied now, or do you think there's still something more?
Oh, I'm sure there's more, but I just internally I don't feel that there's no desire in me to do more. But I mean, something may change.
You should give Milo Yiannopoulos the same kind of treatment that you've given Destiny. Like, you should give him the same sort of, like, just like you think that Destiny is very layered. You should treat Milo Yiannopoulos in the same way, because perhaps you are missing something. Perhaps next time you need to do a decoding Milo Yiannopoulos, because I don't think anybody's understood him.
Yeah, I see him as a flamboyant attention seeker, whether he's, pro-Christian or pro-sodomy. So I find him shallow and uninteresting, but I may change my mind at any point.
No, but he is a man who is attracted to men, and he's tried his best to leave that lifestyle. He is trying to de-gay himself, which I've not seen any homosexual even attempt to do.
But that's what he's saying. I mean, what people say and what people actually do are often different.
No, I believe him. I mean, he's got some Twitter account called the Sodomy Clock, and he updates it like every day or every week. And then, yeah, it'll just say like how many days he's not engaged in any homosexual activity, and it's been a while. It's actually working. So this is a person who's trying. And trying to
maybe
do something that nobody even attempts. In fact, if somebody does try and attempt it, they are then kind of shut down by other people, like, oh, that's so stupid, homosexuality is natural, blah, blah, blah. And then, people, start sharing their opinions of how the world should be and how it should look and what homosexuality is and how natural it is and blah, blah, blah. I think Milo Yiannopoulos has inspired me.
Inspired you in what way to quit your homosexual acting out?
Well, not my personal homosexuality, because I'm not a homosexual. But
right, I know.
He's just done something that is
difficult.
That is out of the ordinary. Yeah.
Yes.
Like it's easier to go to Mars. Like Elon Musk has taken us to Mars, right? So people will attempt that, but they won't attempt this. It's like that thing that we were discussing, status, that people would rather admit to how many STDs they've got than just admit that they are sort of lower status or something. And with homosexuality, you see the same sort of stubbornness.
Yeah, I can't think of any other prominent figure who's very prominently stepping away from sodomy.
You don't even find it in the Muslim community. Like, I'm a bit of an insider to the Muslim community, and like I know people who are Muslims and they're gay, and they just continue being gay. They don't even try to. Like, they might performatively tell people like, oh, like, I'm straight or something, or they might performatively tell people around them who know that they're gay that they're trying or something, and they know that it's haram, as in they know it's forbidden, but they don't actually do anything about it. So my point with that Muslim example is that in even like very sort of conservative faiths, you don't find this kind of determination about homosexuality.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to run. Good to talk to you.
Okay.
Take care.
Yeah.